I stepped into the estate wearing a faded dress and scuffed shoes, smiling like life had wrung me dry. I only wanted to test if my in-laws valued me or just what I could offer. But when the heirloom vanished and every eye turned my way, the chill wasn't from the accusation, it was their rehearsed precision. They were not shocked. They were waiting. This was not a party. It was a trap. My name is Aurora Brooks, and tonight I walked into the lion's den wearing a dress that cost $20 from a thrift store rack. The fabric was stiff, the hem slightly uneven, and my shoes were scuffed at the toes. Whispering a story of hard times and pavement pounding, I had parked my rusted sedan between a gleaming Bentley and a Porsche that probably cost more than my parents' house back in the Midwest. This was the Caldwell estate in suburban Charlotte, North Carolina, a sprawling monument to old money and new anxieties. Currently dressed up for the harvest lantern party, the air was crisp, smelling of expensive pine mulch and wood smoke. Lanterns hung from the ancient oaks lining the driveway, casting long, flickering shadows that seemed to dance like specters. I took a deep breath, clutching a small, simply wrapped box of homemade preserves in my hand. This was the test, the final variable in an equation I had been calculating for months. I needed to know if the Caldwells saw me as family or just a failed investment. I ascended the marble steps, the sound of a string quartet drifting through the open mahogany doors. Inside, the foyer was a kaleidoscope of silk, velvet, and jewels. Waiters moved like ghosts with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Diane Caldwell, my mother-in-law, was holding court near the entrance. She wore a gown that shimmered like liquid silver, her neck draped in diamonds that caught the chandelier's light. When she saw me, her smile didn't falter, but her eyes did. They swept over me, cataloging every flaw, every threadbare inch of my appearance. It was a cold, clinical scan, like a health inspector looking for a violation. "Aurora," she said, her voice smooth but lacking any warmth. She didn't reach out to hug me. "We weren't sure you would make it. Ethan mentioned you were having car trouble again." "It got me here." "Diane," I said, offering the small box. "Happy harvest. It is just something small." She took the box with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. She handed it immediately to a passing server without looking at it. "How quaint," she said, loud enough for the circle of socialites around her to hear. "Well, we all have to cut back where we can. Everyone needs to know their limits in times like these, don't they?" A ripple of polite, cruel laughter moved through the group. I forced a smile, swallowing the pride that wanted to scream in my throat. "Absolutely," I replied, before I could say another word. Vanessa Caldwell, my sister-in-law, materialized at my elbow. "Aurora, so glad you could drag yourself away from whatever it is you are doing for work these days." She hooked her arm through mine, her grip tight, steering me away from the main gathering. "Let me show you to your seat. We made sure you have a special spot." We walked past tables adorned with crystal centerpieces and personalized name cards. We walked past the fireplace where the important guests were laughing. We kept walking until we reached the very back of the ballroom, right next to the swinging double doors of the kitchen. "Here we are," Vanessa said, beaming as she pulled out a chair at a small, wobbly table that was clearly an afterthought. Every time the kitchen doors swung open, a blast of steam and the clatter of dishes would hit me. "It is cozy, right? Plus, you will get the food first." She patted my shoulder with a condescending rhythm. Pat, 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 and walked away before I could answer. I sat down, my back straight. I watched them. I watched Graham Caldwell, the patriarch, tap a spoon against his champagne flute. The room fell silent. Graham stood on the raised platform, looking every bit the Southern king. "To family," he bellowed, raising his glass. "To the Caldwell legacy. In a world of uncertainty, we stand firm because we know the value of what we hold. We protect our assets." His eyes found me at the back of the room. He held my gaze for a second too long when he said the word assets. It wasn't a toast. It was a boundary line. He was telling me I was a liability on a balance sheet he intended to clean up. The party resumed. I sat alone, sipping water, watching the clock. I had been here for 45 minutes. I calculated I would stay for exactly 1 hour to be polite, then leave. Then, the performance began. A shrill cry cut through the ambient chatter. Diane was standing at the top of the grand staircase, one hand clutching her wrist, her face a mask of theatrical horror. "It is gone!" she shrieked. "My emerald bracelet! The heirloom! It is gone!" The music stopped. The chatter died. All heads turned upward. Graham rushed to her side, his face grave. "Are you sure, darling? Where did you leave it?" "I took it off in the guest dressing room just 10 minutes ago to wash my hands," Diane wailed, descending the stairs, her voice trembling with practiced vibration. "I left it on the vanity. When I went back, it was gone." She paused, her eyes searching the crowd until they landed on me. "There was no one else up there, except—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The silence in the room grew heavy, suffocating. "Aurora," Graham said, his voice booming. "You were using the upstairs restroom, were you not?" I stood up slowly, my heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the sudden, icy clarity of what was happening. "I used the guest powder room downstairs. Graham, I have not been upstairs all night." "That is not true," Vanessa chimed in from the crowd, her voice sharp. "I saw you coming down the stairs when you arrived. You said you wanted to freshen up." "I did not," I said, my voice steady, though my hands curled into fists at my sides. "We cannot take chances with a piece of history like that," Graham announced. He snapped his fingers. Immediately, 3 men in dark suits stepped out from the shadows of the room. They weren't regular event security. They moved with military precision. They surrounded my small table by the kitchen doors, boxing me in. "Ma'am," the lead guard said, extending a gloved hand, "we need to check your bag. Now." The humiliation was visceral. The entire room, 60, maybe 70 people, stared at me. I was the poor daughter-in-law, the charity case. And now, the thief. I looked for Ethan, my husband, the man who had promised to protect me from his family's snobbery. He was standing near the bar, a glass of scotch halfway to his mouth. He looked at me, then looked at his father, and then he looked down at his shoes. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't step forward to say, "My wife is not a thief." That silence broke something in me that I hadn't realized was still intact. I said, "Give me the bag," the guard repeated, stepping closer. His looming presence a physical threat. I handed over my worn leather purse. The guard dumped the contents onto the tablecloth, my keys, a cheap lipstick, a wallet with $3 in cash, and my phone clattered out. There was no bracelet. The guard patted the lining, frowned, and looked up at Graham. He shook his head slightly. For a split second, Graham's composure slipped. He looked annoyed, not relieved. And then I saw it. Just a flicker. Graham looked past me, toward the kitchen staff entrance, and winked at someone in the shadows. A quick, sharp contraction of his left eye. It wasn't a signal of reassurance. It was a signal of Plan B. They hadn't just expected to find the bracelet. They were surprised they hadn't. Or perhaps the accusation itself was the point. The humiliation was the weapon. They didn't need to prove I stole it. They just needed everyone to believe I could have. "It must be on her person," Diane hissed, clutching her chest. "Search her." "That is enough," I said. My voice was low, but it carried across the silent room. I picked up my phone and my keys. "You have humiliated me enough for one night. If you want to search me, call the police. I will wait for them. But I will not let your hired thugs touch me." I held Graham's gaze. I wanted him to see that I wasn't trembling. I wanted him to see that while he was playing a game of checkers, I had just started memorizing the board. The air in the room was electric, brittle enough to snap. I stood there, the broke girl in the cheap dress, surrounded by millions of dollars of jewelry and 0 ounces of integrity. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt dangerous. I am 36 years old, and I was raised in a part of the Midwest where the sky stretches so wide it makes you feel insignificant and important all at once. My father was a shift manager at a packaging plant, and my mother taught third grade. We did not have trust funds or summer homes. We had savings bonds and a deep, abiding fear of debt. I learned early that money was not a toy but a tool for survival. I built my life on that principle. I worked 2 jobs through college, graduated without a cent of student loans, and climbed the corporate ladder with bloody fingernails and a closed mouth. My job title at Northgate Integrity Solutions is Senior Risk Control Specialist, but what I actually do is hunt. I hunt for the discrepancies in the ledgers, the ghost employees on the payroll, and the quiet leaks where a company's profit bleeds out into private offshore accounts. I am an internal investigator. My career is built on the understanding that people lie. They lie to save their skins. They lie to protect their egos. And most often, they lie because they think no one is watching the details. When I met Ethan 3 years ago, I thought I had finally found a place where I could stop watching. He was charming, soft-spoken, and seemingly detached from the aggressive materialism of his family. He told me he wanted a simple life, away from the pressure of the Caldwell legacy. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. After a decade of auditing fraud and dissecting corporate corruption, I was tired. I wanted a home. I wanted a partner who saw me, not a resource. The Caldwells were welcoming at first. Diane sent flowers. Graham invited us to golf at the club. But the warmth had a temperature limit, and it dropped significantly the moment they realized I was not going to be their personal bank. The shift was subtle. It started 6 months ago at a dinner party. Graham had casually mentioned a bridge loan for a development project that was stuck in zoning red tape. He had looked at me with expectant eyes, mentioning that someone with my financial acumen would understand the potential high yield. I had politely declined, citing a conflict of interest with my firm's compliance policies. That was the first crack in the facade. The invitations became fewer. The comments about my frugal habits became sharper. They started treating my financial responsibility as a character flaw, a lack of sophistication. Before tonight, I had done what I always do. I investigated. It was instinct. I had heard whispers in the local business circles, the kind of rumors that float around country club locker rooms and high-end bars. The Caldwells were land-rich and cash-poor. They were leveraged to the hilt, floating on credit lines that were close to snapping. They needed a cash injection, and they needed it fast. That was why I wore the old dress. That was why I drove the car I keep for fieldwork instead of my actual vehicle. That was why I brought a jar of jam instead of a bottle of vintage wine. It was a stress test. I needed to know if I was a member of this family or just a liquidity solution they hadn't tapped yet. If they treated me with kindness while thinking I was struggling, I would know their love was real. Instead, they tried to arrest me. Standing there in the center of the ballroom, with the security guard's hand hovering near my arm and the silence of the crowd pressing against my eardrums. The realization washed over me. It was colder than the air conditioning. It wasn't just that they were disappointed in my lack of wealth. It was that they had weaponized it. They saw a woman they thought was weak, unconnected, and financially unstable, and they decided she was the perfect scapegoat. I looked at Ethan again. He was still staring at the floor. In my line of work, we call this the tell. An innocent man looks at the accuser. A confused man looks at the victim. A guilty man looks away. He knew. The air left my lungs, but my face remained stone. My husband, the man who held me when I had the flu, the man who promised to build a life with me, was part of the architecture of this ambush. He might not have stolen the bracelet himself, but he knew the play. He knew they needed a scandal to distract from something else, or perhaps they needed to pressure me into a legal bind where I would have to trade my savings for my freedom. It didn't matter why in that second. What mattered was that he was letting it happen. He was not the safe harbor I thought he was. He was just another shark in the water. Only he didn't have the courage to bite. He just swam with the school. "I am leaving," I announced. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a razor. "You cannot just leave," Diane shrieked, her performance reaching a crescendo. "Graham, stop her. She has the bracelet." "The police can come to my house," I said, locking eyes with Graham. "I live at 405 Maple Drive. You have the address. Send them. I will have tea ready. But I'm walking out of this door right now. And if any of your private security staff touches me, I will file assault charges before the sun comes up. And Graham, you know I have the legal team to back that up. It was a bluff, mostly. I didn't want to use my connections yet. But Graham didn't know how deep my resources actually went. He only knew what I let him see." He hesitated. That split second of hesitation was all I needed. I turned my back on them. I did not run. I did not hurry. I walked with the measured pace of an auditor walking through a warehouse. Noting violations, I clocked the brand of the security firm on the guards' jackets. Vanguard Shield, a subsidiary I vaguely recognized as having a reputation for aggressive tactics and low-grade staff. I noted the way Vanessa was already typing furiously on her phone, likely spinning the narrative on social media before I even reached the parking lot. I noted the look on the catering manager's face, a mixture of pity and confusion. She hadn't seen anyone go upstairs. I filed that away. Witness. I walked out into the cool night air. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind me, muffling the murmurs of the elite. I walked to my rusted sedan, the gravel crunching under my scuffed shoes. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. I did not cry. My hands were steady as I put the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered once before turning over, a sound that usually annoyed me but tonight sounded like defiance. I checked the rearview mirror. No one followed me. They were probably too busy celebrating their victory, drinking champagne and consoling poor, victimized Diane. They thought they had crushed me. They thought I would go home and weep, terrified of the accusations, desperate to beg for their forgiveness. They had no idea who they had just declared war on. I pulled out of the driveway, the long shadows of the lanterns stretching across the hood of my car. I wasn't just a daughter-in-law anymore. I was an investigator on an active case. I began to build the file in my mind. Subject: the Caldwell family. Incident: attempted framing for grand larceny. Motive: financial distress and coercion. Accomplice: Ethan Brooks. I merged onto the highway, the lights of Charlotte blurring into streaks of gold and red. The sadness was there, deep in my chest, a heavy, aching stone where my love for Ethan used to be. But I pushed it down. I packed it into a box and shoved it into the back corner of my mind. I could not afford to grieve the marriage yet. I had to survive the divorce. And to do that, I needed to prove not just my innocence, but their guilt. I needed to find out exactly how broke they were, and exactly what they were trying to hide with this pathetic charade. I reached for my phone and voice-dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. It went to voicemail. "This is Aurora," I said, my voice flat and professional. "I need a full asset search and a background check on a Graham Caldwell and a Diane Caldwell, and a company called Caldwell Heritage Development. I need it by tomorrow morning. Bill me the rush fee." I hung up. The game had started. They moved the first pawn, but they forgot one thing. They were playing for appearances. I was playing for blood. The morning light did not bring clarity. It brought a headache and a vibrating phone that danced across my nightstand like a nervous beetle. It was 8:30 in the morning. I looked at the screen. It was Diane. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I needed to make sure my voice was steady, void of the sleep and dread that threatened to crack it. "Hello, Diane," I said. "Aurora, dear." Her voice floated through the speaker, sickly sweet and thick with artificial concern. It was a stark contrast to the venom she had spat the night before. "We are all just so worried about you. Graham and I barely slept. We have been discussing how to handle this unfortunate situation without involving the authorities. You know how we value privacy." "There is no situation to handle, Diane," I replied, sitting up and pulling the duvet tight around my chest. "I did not take the bracelet." "Oh, stop it," she interrupted, her tone sharpening just a fraction before smoothing out again. We are trying to help you. Graham thinks that if you just write a formal statement explaining your circumstances, you know, the financial stress you have been under, we can frame it as a cry for help rather than a crime. We can keep the police out of it. We just need to document it for the insurance company to show we are resolving it internally. A statement, I repeated, my investigator brain clicking into gear. You want me to write a confession. We want you to take responsibility so we can move on. Graham's voice suddenly boomed from the background. He must have been listening on speakerphone. If you cooperate, Aurora, we will let it go. We will not press charges. We will even help you with some of those debts you are clearly drowning in. Consider it a fresh start. It sounded like a lifeline. To anyone else, it might have sounded like mercy, but to me, it sounded like a transaction. They were not offering forgiveness. They were purchasing my guilt. I hung up without agreeing to anything. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage. I opened my social media apps. I rarely use them, but I knew Vanessa lived on them. Sure enough, her story was a blur of perfectly curated outrage. There was a black screen with white text, posted 2 hours ago. It is heartbreaking when you open your home to people who have less, only to be betrayed. Some outsiders just do not understand the meaning of loyalty. Sad day for the family. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. The comments were already rolling in from the circle of elites who had been at the party. So sorry to hear this. V, I knew something was off about her. Hope you guys are okay. Keep your circle tight. Babe. My own notifications were a wasteland. 2 mutual friends from the club had blocked me. Another had sent a text simply saying, I think it is best we cancel lunch next week. The isolation was swift and surgical. They were cutting off my support system before I even had a chance to speak. Then came the email. It arrived at 9:15 with a high-priority flag. The sender was Caldwell Family Legal Counsel, a generic address I did not recognize from any of Graham's usual high-powered firms. Subject, restitution agreement, urgent. I opened the attachment. It was a dense, 3-page PDF. I scanned the legalese, my eyes narrowing. It was a demand for a civil compromise. It stated that in exchange for the Caldwells, agreeing not to pursue criminal prosecution for the theft of the Emerald Heritage Cuff, I would agree to repay the estimated value of the item. The value listed was $75,000. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. $75,000. They knew I didn't have that kind of money. Or rather, they knew the broke version of me didn't. You got the email? I turned. Ethan was standing in the doorway of our bedroom. He looked like he hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, and his hair was unkempt. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the floorboards, seemingly fascinated by the grain of the wood. I got it, I said, standing up and walking past him to the kitchen. I needed coffee. I needed to think. They want $75,000. Ethan, for a bracelet I did not steal. He followed me, his footsteps heavy. Aurora, look, Dad is really upset, but he says this is the only way to fix it. If you sign the paper, it goes away. They file it. The insurance pays them, and you pay us back over time, like a loan. I can help you with the payments. I spun around, the coffee mug gripping my hand like a weapon. A loan? You want me to pay your parents $75,000 for a crime I did not commit? Are you insane? It is better than jail, he snapped. His head snapping up. For the first time, he looked at me, and I saw the terror in his eyes. It wasn't fear for me, it was fear of them. They have witnesses. Aurora, Mom says she saw you near the room. Vanessa saw you. If the police come, it is your word against theirs. And let's be honest, who are they going to believe? The Caldwells, or the girl from the Midwest with the scuffed shoes? I finished for him. Just sign it, he pleaded, his voice dropping to a whisper. Please, for us. Just sign it so we can stop this. I need to check our accounts, I said. ignoring him. If I am going to be sued, I need to know what we have for a defense lawyer. I grabbed my laptop and logged into our joint bank portal. We had a shared savings account where we deposited our paychecks for the mortgage and bills. I had put a significant portion of my bonuses in there over the last 2 years. I typed in my username and password. Access denied. I tried again. Maybe my fingers slipped. Access denied. Contact administrator. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. I logged into the secondary checking account. Same message. Ethan, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Why can't I access our money? He flinched. He actually flinched. Dad said we needed to freeze the assets, just temporarily, until the restitution agreement is signed, to make sure the funds aren't moved. Moved? I walked closer to him. It is my money too. Ethan, half of that account is my salary. You let them lock me out of my own money? It is a protective measure, he yelled, backing away. God, why do you have to be so difficult? Just sign the damn paper. He slammed his hand on the counter. A piece of paper slid out from under his folder. It wasn't the email printout. It was something else. I reached for it. Don't, he said, trying to grab it back. I was faster. I pulled the document free and read the header. Statement of admission and regret. It was dated today. It was written in the first person. I, Aurora Brooks, hereby admit that on the night of the Harvest Lantern Party, I entered the private dressing room of Diane Caldwell and removed the Emerald Heritage cuff. I acted alone, driven by severe financial distress and a lapse in judgment. I return the item, or agree to its value, and ask for the family's forgiveness. I read it twice. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. You wrote this? I asked, looking at Ethan. Mom drafted it, he stammered. She said it would be easier for you, so you wouldn't have to worry about the wording. You just have to sign at the bottom. I looked at the signature line. There was a sticky note with a yellow arrow pointing to it. Sign here. They hadn't just accused me. They hadn't just isolated me. They had scripted my destruction. They had pre-written my confession before I had even woken up this morning. This wasn't about a missing bracelet. You don't draft a legal confession and a restitution agreement overnight for a simple theft. You don't freeze bank accounts within 12 hours unless you have the paperwork ready to go beforehand. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My poverty at the party wasn't the reason they hated me. It was the reason they had chosen me. They didn't look down on me because I was broke. They were counting on it. They needed someone desperate. They needed someone who looked like they needed the money. So that when the bracelet went missing, the narrative would be perfect. They are not trying to get the bracelet back, I whispered. What? Ethan asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. They don't want the bracelet, I said, looking at my husband with eyes that no longer saw a partner, but a suspect. They want the paper. They want a legal document saying I owe them $75,000, and they want a confession saying I am a thief. You are paranoid, Ethan scoffed, though his voice wavered. Just sign it, Aurora, or I don't know what I can do to stop them from calling the sheriff. I looked at the document one last time. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. If I signed this, I would be in debt to them forever. I would be a convicted thief on paper. Even if they never went to police, they would own me. And if I ever tried to leave Ethan, or if I ever tried to expose their financial secrets, they would dangle this confession over my head. I am going for a walk, I said, dropping the paper on the counter. Where are you going? Ethan demanded. You have to sign. I need air, I said. I grabbed my keys. Don't follow me, Ethan. If you follow me, I drive straight to the police station and file a report for financial abuse regarding the bank account. Try me. He stopped. He stayed in the kitchen, paralyzed by his own cowardice. I walked out to my car. My hands were steady now. The shock was gone, replaced by the cold, hard clarity of an investigator who had just found the smoking gun. They wanted a villain. They wanted a broke, desperate thief to cover up whatever hole was in their ledger. They thought they had trapped a mouse. They were about to find out they had locked themselves in a cage with a cobra. I pulled my phone out and dialed the one number I knew would answer on the first ring. My personal lawyer, Tessa, who I kept on a retainer that the Caldwells knew nothing about. "Tessa," I said when she picked up, "I need you to open a case file. We are going to war." Tessa Langford's office was not in the high-rise district where the Caldwells kept their retainers. It was in a converted warehouse in the South End, a space of exposed brick and aggressive minimalism. Tessa herself was much the same. Sharp angles, dark suits, and eyes that looked like they could scan a contract through a lead envelope. "Do not sign it," Tessa said, sliding the printed copy of the Statement of Admission back across her glass desk. She didn't even blink. "In fact, do not even touch it again. If you sign that document, you are not just admitting to theft. You are creating a binding contract of debt. It is a confession of judgment." "They froze my joint accounts." "Tessa," I said, leaning forward. "Ethan said it was a protective measure." "It is a pressure tactic," Tessa corrected, tapping a pen against her notebook. "They are cutting off your air supply to make you gasp, and when you gasp, you will inhale whatever poison they offer you. Here is the rule from this second forward. No phone calls, no face-to-face meetings without me. If they want to speak to you, they send an email. If they want to threaten you, they do it in writing. We need a paper trail so thick we can choke them with it." I nodded, feeling the first true sense of stability I had felt in 24 hours. "Where do we start?" "We investigate," Tessa said. "You said you are a risk control specialist. Stop acting like a defendant and start acting like an auditor. Find the holes in their story." I left her office with a mission. The sadness regarding my marriage was still there. A dull ache in the background, but my adrenaline was focused entirely on the hunt. My first stop was digital. I pulled up the contact information for the security firm the Caldwells had used. Vanguard Shield. I sent a formal request from my personal email, copying Tessa, asking for the incident report regarding the alleged loss of property at the Caldwell estate. I cited my right to view the accusations made against me. To my surprise, they replied within 45 minutes. It was a standard PDF report, likely sent to intimidate me with its official appearance. I sat in my car and opened it. I scrolled past the summary of the evening and focused on the timeline. The report stated that the subject, me, was observed entering the hallway leading to the dressing room at 9:15. It claimed the item was reported missing at 9:30. I frowned. I zoomed in on the metadata of the digital file. The file creation timestamp was 8:45 in the evening. I froze. The report detailing the theft had been created 45 minutes before the theft allegedly happened. They had written the script before the curtain even went up. The timestamp was the first crack in their porcelain facade. I drove to the catering company's headquarters. It was a bustling kitchen in an industrial park. I asked to speak to the manager who had overseen the Harvest Lantern Party. Her name was Maria, a no-nonsense woman who remembered me because I was the only guest who had thanked the servers by name. "I need to know something." "Maria," I asked her quietly, standing near the loading dock. "The dressing room upstairs. Did you see anyone go in or out?" Maria wiped her hands on her apron and looked around to ensure we were alone. "I was running trays up the service elevator. It opens right across from that room. I saw Mrs. Caldwell, Diane, go in there around 9 o'clock. "Did she come right out?" I asked. "No," Maria shook her head. "She was in there for a long time, maybe 20 minutes. I remember because I had time to do 2 full rounds of champagne service before I saw the door open again. She looked flustered. She was checking her phone." "Thank you. Maria," I said, "would you be willing to write that down?" "If it helps," she said. "I did not like the way they looked at you." Next, I called the venue management. The estate was a historic rental, not the Caldwell's private home, which meant there were surveillance cameras in the common areas. "I am requesting footage from the second-floor landing between 9 and 9:30, I told the venue director over the phone. "I am sorry. Mrs. Brooks," the director replied, his voice tight. "We have been instructed that all data regarding that evening is currently under legal hold." Under whose authority? I demanded. The legal representative for the event host, Mr. Graham Caldwell, he said. They cited a privacy clause in the rental contract. We cannot release footage to third parties without a court order. I am not a third party, I snapped. I am the accused. I cannot help you, he said, and the line went dead. They had locked it down. Graham knew exactly what those cameras saw, and he had made sure no one else would see it, but the refusal itself was evidence. Innocent people do not hide security footage. They broadcast it. I went back to my laptop. I needed to know who Vanguard Shield was. The security guards had been too aggressive, too personal. I ran a business entity search on the Secretary of State website. Vanguard Shield was not a national firm. It was a limited liability company registered only 3 months ago. The registered agent was a lawyer I didn't know. But the principal office address looked familiar. I plugged the address into a map search. It was a mailbox store in a strip mall. I dug deeper. Pulling the articles of organization, the managing member of Vanguard Shield was listed as Obsidian Management, LLC. I searched Obsidian Management, LLC. The trail was getting muddy, designed to be confusing, but I was good at this. I followed the chain of ownership through 3 different shell companies until I found a name attached to a filing fee paid 2 years ago. Vanessa Caldwell. My sister-in-law didn't just hire the security, she owned the security. The men who had surrounded me, who had threatened to search me, were on her payroll. It was a theater troupe, and Vanessa was the director. But why? Why go to such lengths? The timestamp proved premeditation. The witness proved Diane was lying. The security company proved conspiracy. But what was the motive? Humiliation was a strong motivator. But this was expensive. This took legal fees, shell companies, and hush money. You don't spend $10,000 just to embarrass your daughter-in-law unless you expect a return on investment much higher than that. I thought about the restitution agreement again. $75,000. It was a specific number. I logged into a credit monitoring service. Since I couldn't access my bank accounts, I needed to see if there was any other damage. I pulled my full credit report. My eyes scanned the list of open accounts: mortgage, joint, car lease, joint, credit cards, paid off. Then, at the bottom of the list, under new inquiries and open trade lines, my heart stopped. Lender, Liberty Capital Solutions. Type, unsecured personal line of credit. Date opened 2 weeks ago. Status, active. Balance, $75,000. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. I had never heard of Liberty Capital Solutions. I had never applied for a line of credit 2 weeks ago. I clicked on the details. The address listed for the applicant was my home address. The email used was an old one of mine that I hadn't accessed in years, one that Ethan knew the password to. The pieces slammed together with terrifying velocity. The Caldwells were broke. I knew that. They needed cash. They couldn't get it themselves because their credit was likely shot. So they, or Ethan, under their direction, had used my clean credit history to open a $75,000 line of credit in my name. They had already spent the money. That was why the balance was maxed out immediately. But now, the bill was coming due. If I found out, I would report it as fraud, and they would go to prison for identity theft. Unless I admitted to stealing a bracelet worth exactly $75,000, if I signed that restitution agreement, I would be agreeing to pay them back. I would be taking on a debt of $75,000 to repay them for the bracelet. They would take that money, my money, paid over years, and use it to pay off the fraudulent loan they took out in my name. They were laundering their own fraud through my confession. They didn't just want to frame me. They needed to legally bind me to the debt they had already created. If I signed the confession, I couldn't claim identity theft later. They would argue the money I owed them was for the bracelet, covering the paper trail of the loan. I sat back in my chair, the cold light of the laptop illuminating a face that was no longer shocked. I looked at the names on the screen. Diane, Graham, Vanessa, Ethan. They weren't a family. They were a cartel. and they had made the fatal mistake of trying to hustle the one woman who knew how to read the fine print. I picked up my phone and called Tessa. "I found it," I said, my voice ice cold. "I know why they need the signature. They stole my identity before they accused me of stealing the jewelry." "Can you prove it?" Tessa asked. "Not yet," I said, "but I know where to look. They filed the loan paperwork, which means somewhere there is a forged signature, and I am going to find it." I sat in the glow of my laptop screen, the only light in the room, and initiated a credit freeze on all 3 major bureaus. It was a defensive perimeter, a digital moat to stop the bleeding. The confirmation codes flashed on the screen, locking down my financial identity. No one, not Graham, not Vanessa, not even Ethan, could open a new account in my name without a PIN that only I possessed. But the damage was already done. I clicked back to the unauthorized line of credit from Liberty Capital Solutions. I needed to see where the money had gone. The $75,000 had not been withdrawn as cash. It had been transferred directly to a vendor account labeled Caldwell Heritage Renovation, Project Alpha. I recognized the name immediately. Caldwell Heritage Development was the family's flagship company, the entity that supposedly managed their portfolio of commercial real estate. I pulled up the public records for the company. On the surface, it looked legitimate. They had a glossy website featuring renderings of luxury condos and smiling families. I dug deeper. I accessed the county clerk's database to check the liens and judgments against the company. The screen filled with red flags. Caldwell Heritage Development was drowning. There were 3 active lawsuits from contractors for unpaid invoices. There was a tax lien from the IRS filed 6 months ago for $200,000. And most damning of all, I found a pattern of refinancing. They were taking out new loans to pay off the interest on old loans. It was a classic debt spiral, a financial Ponzi scheme where the only thing keeping the collapse at bay was the constant injection of fresh capital. That was where the Harvest Lantern Party came in. And more importantly, the upcoming Caldwell Community Endowment Gala. I shifted my search to the endowment. It was registered as a nonprofit, a charitable arm of the family business intended to support local arts and education. I pulled their Form 990 tax filings, which were public record. The numbers did not add up. The administrative costs were astronomical. Nearly 60% of the donations went to consulting fees paid to entities like Obsidian Management, LLC. Vanessa's company, they were funneling donor money out of the charity through Vanessa's shell company and likely back into Caldwell Heritage Development to service the debt. It was money laundering, plain and simple. But why me? Why the theft accusation? I found the answer in a leaked internal memo from a disgruntled former accountant of theirs. Posted on a niche financial watchdog forum, I monitored for work. The post was dated 3 months ago. It warned that the state attorney general was launching an audit into local family-run nonprofits. They needed a scapegoat. They needed someone clean to sign off on the retroactive paperwork. If the audit happened, they could point to the consultant or the beneficiary who had mishandled the funds. And then it clicked. The broke narrative. If I was destitute, if I was publicly shamed for being poor and a thief, I would be desperate. A desperate person signs things. A desperate person accepts help. If I signed that restitution agreement for the bracelet, acknowledging a $75,000 debt to them, they could frame it as a loan from the endowment to a family member in crisis. It would explain the missing money in their books. Where did the $75,000 go? Oh, we gave it to our poor, troubled daughter-in-law to keep her out of jail. I was not just a victim of bullying. I was the solution to their accounting error. The front door opened downstairs. Ethan. I closed the laptop but did not move. He walked into the home office a moment later, holding a takeout bag. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, the golden boy facade crumbling. "Aurora," he said, placing the food on the desk. "Please, you have to eat." "I am not hungry," I said. He pulled up a chair and sat close to me, too close. "I spoke to Dad. He is willing to compromise. He says if you sign the admission tonight, he will not even file it with the insurance. He just needs it for the family records. To close the loop. The loop on what, Ethan? I asked, watching him closely. The loop on the $75,000 you guys stole from the endowment? His face went white. It was a total drainage of color, leaving him looking like a wax figure. I don't know what you are talking about, he stammered, but his eyes darted to the door. Caldwell Heritage is insolvent, I said, my voice steady. You are rolling debt. The gala is a cash grab to pay off the interest before the audit hits, and you need me to be the sinkhole for the missing funds. Ethan put his head in his hands. It is just temporary. Aurora, we are going through a liquidity crunch. The development in Uptown is stalled. Once the permits clear, we will have millions. We just need to bridge the gap. So you decided to bridge it with my credit score and my reputation, I said. We were going to pay it back, he pleaded. Looking up, I swear, Dad has a plan, but right now, we need you to help us. If you don't sign that paper, the audit will flag the transfer. They will look into the accounts. Dad could go to prison. I could go to prison. You should have thought of that before you opened a line of credit in my name, I said. It is just a formality, he shouted, desperation making his voice crack. Just sign the paper, Aurora. Act like the supportive wife you promised to be. If you love me, you will save my family. I love the man who told me he wanted a simple life, I said. I do not know who you are. He stared at me, his jaw working, and for a moment I thought he might hit me. Then he grabbed the takeout bag and stormed out of the room. You are making a mistake. You do not know what they are capable of when they are cornered. He slammed the door. I sat there in the silence, my heart pounding against my ribs. He had confirmed it, all of it. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was not a text. It was an encrypted message on Signal. From a number I did not know. Read this before you do anything else. They have done this before. You are next. Attached was a single PDF file titled Elena_C_2 018.pdf. I opened it. It was a collection of scanned court documents and news clippings from 8 years ago. The subject was Elena Caldwell. I frowned. I had never heard of an Elena Caldwell. I read the summary. Elena was Graham's younger brother's wife. In 2018, she was accused of embezzling funds from a family trust. The family threatened to prosecute, to avoid jail time. She signed a confession and agreed to take on the debt. She lost her house, her savings, and custody of her children. But the last page of the file was a report from a private investigator, dated a year after her confession. It showed that the money she supposedly embezzled had actually been used to pay off a gambling debt for Graham Caldwell. Elena hadn't stolen anything. She had been the vessel for their sins. She had been the broke relative they sacrificed to balance the books. I looked at the date of her death, 2020. She didn't survive the aftermath. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. This was not just a white-collar crime. This was a meat grinder. They found women who they thought were weak. They isolated them. They burdened them with the family's financial rot. And then they discarded them. I was not just fighting a lawsuit. I was fighting for my life. I typed a reply to the unknown number. Who are you? 3 dots appeared. Then the message came through. Someone who didn't sign. I deleted the message immediately. I grabbed a hard drive and began backing up everything I had found. The tax returns, the lien records, the loan documents, the screenshot of the chat. Ethan was right about one thing. They were dangerous, but he was wrong about the mistake. The mistake was not mine. The mistake was thinking that because I bought my clothes at a thrift store, I didn't know the value of freedom. I stood up. I needed to get out of this house. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene, and I was the evidence they were trying to bury. Tessa Langford looked at the digital file of the statement of admission I had forwarded to her, and she didn't just frown. She practically vibrated with predatory focus. We were sitting in her office, the morning sun cutting through the warehouse windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like suspended secrets. They are getting sloppy, Tessa said, leaning back in her chair. This isn't just a confession, Aurora. It is a suicide note for your financial future. But if we fight them with a lawsuit right now, they will bury us in paper. They have the resources to drag a discovery phase out for 2 years. We do not have 2 years. So what do we do? I asked. I can't sign it. No, Tessa agreed. But we can make them think you might. We need to lure them out of their fortress. Right now, they are communicating through emails and proxies because they feel safe. We need to get them in a room. When narcissists feel safe, they talk. And when they talk, they brag. We hatched the plan. I sent a text to Ethan an hour later. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of suppressing my rage. I am ready to end this. I want to move forward, but I need to understand the terms. Send the full agreement to my lawyer, and we can meet to sign. The response was immediate, within 30 minutes. A courier arrived at Tessa's office with a thick envelope. It was heavy, bonded paper, the kind that whispered expensive authority. The cover letter was signed by Graham, full of benevolent language about family unity and second chances, but as Tessa and I dissected the document, the benevolence dissolved into malice. Look at this, Tessa said, highlighting a paragraph on page 4. Clause 17, Section B. The signatory agrees to assume full liability for any and all outstanding debts associated with the Caldwell Community Endowment retroactive to January 1st of this year. They aren't just asking you to pay for the bracelet, Aurora. They are trying to transfer the entire deficit of the charity onto your shoulders. And here, I pointed to a power of attorney form tucked at the back. Limited power of attorney for asset management. If I sign this, Graham gets legal authority to access my retirement accounts to satisfy the restitution. It is a trap, Tessa said, her voice low. A beautifully constructed legal bear trap. They want you to voluntarily walk into it so they can claim you agreed to help the family. Set the meeting, I said, closing the folder. I want to look them in the eye when they try to hand me the pen. We scheduled it for 2 o'clock that afternoon. Graham protested. Of course. He wanted the meeting at the estate, or at his corporate attorney's office downtown, but I held my ground. I feel safer with my representation, I told him. He couldn't refuse without looking like he was bullying me, and right now, he needed my compliance more than he needed his comfort. At 1:55, the Caldwell caravan arrived. Graham walked in first, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. Diane followed, looking pale and tragic, clutching a handkerchief she didn't need. Vanessa was next, typing on her phone, looking bored. And finally, Ethan. He looked like a ghost. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He sat at the far end of the conference table, shrinking into his collar. Bringing up the rear was a man I didn't recognize. He was short, sweating profusely, and carrying a notary stamp in a worn leather bag. Thank you for seeing us, Ms. Langford, Graham said, his voice booming in the acoustic space. He didn't offer to shake hands. We just want to get this unpleasantness behind us. Aurora, dear, I am glad you came to your senses. I just want to understand the paperwork. Graham, I said, keeping my voice small. I want to help. Of course you do, Diane said, sniffing. We are family. We help each other. Tessa cleared her throat. Before we proceed, who is this? She gestured to the sweating man. This is Mr. Henderson, Graham said quickly. He is a notary public. We brought him along to expedite the process. We didn't want to inconvenience you. Tessa smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How thoughtful, Mr. Henderson. May I see your commission and your identification? Mr. Henderson froze. He looked at Graham. Graham's jaw tightened. Is that necessary? Vanessa snapped, looking up from her phone. He is just here to stamp the paper. Let's just get on with it. I have a spa appointment at 4. It is absolutely necessary, Tessa said, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. In my office, we follow strict protocol. ID, please. Mr. Henderson reluctantly handed over a laminated card. Tessa studied it for a long silence. Mr. Henderson, Tessa said, sliding the card back. This commission expires in 3 days, and looking at the state database, she tapped her keyboard. It appears your license is currently under review for a violation regarding improperly witnessed documents in a real estate transaction last year. The room went deadly silent. We can use my notary, Tessa offered pleasantly. She is in the next room. Fine, Graham grunted, waving his hand dismissively. Whatever. Let's just sign the damn thing. Tessa opened the folder. We have some questions about the debt assumption clause. Mr. Caldwell, Aurora is acknowledging the theft of a bracelet valued at $75,000. Why does this contract require her to assume liability for the endowment's operating costs? It is standard language, Graham said, smoothing his tie. Just boilerplate, to ensure that if there are legal fees associated with the recovery, she covers them. It protects the charity. It reads like a debt transfer, I said, speaking up. It reads like I'm agreeing to pay off a loan I didn't take out. Don't be paranoid. Aurora, Diane said, her voice trembling with manufactured hurt. After everything you have done, stealing from me in my own home, and now you question our motives when we are trying to save you from prison? I didn't steal anything. Diane, I said quietly. Then sign the paper and prove you are sorry, Vanessa yelled. She slammed her phone down on the table. The boredom was gone, replaced by a jagged, desperate anger. God, why does this have to be so hard? Every single time we try to fix things, you people make it so difficult. You people? I asked. Who is you people, Vanessa? Outsiders, she hissed. People who come into this family and think they are entitled to a free ride. We are offering you a way out. Just take the pen. I am reading the fine print, I said, looking at the document. I just don't want to end up in a situation I can't control. You are already in a situation you cannot control, Graham roared. Losing his composure, he stood up, placing his hands on the table. We have the security footage. We have the witnesses. You sign this, or I call the district attorney right now. Show me the footage, Tessa said calmly. I don't have to show you anything, Graham shouted. If it exists, I want to see it, I said. Show me the video of me taking the bracelet. We are doing you a favor, Vanessa interjected, her face flushing red. Stop stalling. Just sign the paper so we can transfer the liability and be done with it. We handled it exactly like this last time, and it was fine. The air left the room. It was instantaneous. Graham whipped his head toward his daughter, his eyes wide with fury. Diane gasped. Tessa didn't move, but I saw her finger tap the record button on her laptop screen. Last time? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What do you mean? Last time. Vanessa? Vanessa blinked, realizing she had walked off the ledge. I meant with the contractors. When we had disputes, we settled it internally. No, I said, looking at Ethan. He was staring at his sister, his face a mask of absolute horror. He wasn't looking at her like she had made a mistake. He was looking at her like she had just dug up a body. That is not what you meant. You said you handled it exactly like this, meaning you have made someone sign a confession for a debt before. Ethan, I said, turning to my husband, who was it last time? Ethan looked at me. His lip quivered. For a second, I thought he might break. I thought the man I loved might finally step out from the shadow of his father and tell the truth. Aurora, don't, he whispered. Just please. Who was she? Ethan? I pressed, leaning in. Was it Elena? The name landed like a grenade. Graham sat down slowly. Diane put her hand over her mouth. Ethan closed his eyes. They didn't ask how I knew the name. They didn't deny it. The reaction was the confirmation. The silence that followed was heavy with the ghosts of the past. They had done this before. They had crushed a woman to save their bank accounts. And they had gotten away with it. And because they had gotten away with it, They thought they could do it to me. I think we are done here, Tessa said, closing the folder with a sharp snap. My client will not be signing anything today, or ever. You listen to me, Graham hissed, his voice low and dangerous. You walk out of here without signing that. And I will ruin you. I will make sure you never work in this town again. I will bury you in legal fees until you are begging for a cardboard box to sleep in. I stood up. I felt lighter than I had in days. The fear was gone. You can try, Graham, I said. But you just admitted there was a last time, and my lawyer just noted that your daughter implied a pattern of conduct. You are not the ones who should be worried about being ruined. I looked at Ethan one last time. He still hadn't opened his eyes. Goodbye, Ethan, I said. I walked out of the conference room. Tessa right beside me. We didn't speak until we were in the safety of the hallway. Did you get it? I asked. I got the audio of Vanessa's outburst, Tessa said, a grim smile playing on her lips. And I got the notary's license number. We have enough to start a war. I looked back at the closed door. I hadn't signed their confession, but in their arrogance, they had just signed their own. They had confirmed the one thing I needed to know to take them down. It wasn't a mistake. It was a methodology. I sat in the wingback chair in the corner of our living room, the lights off, watching the headlights of Ethan's car sweep across the ceiling. It was 10 o'clock at night. The house was quiet, but it was not peaceful. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a bomb shelter before the raid begins. When the front door opened, I did not move. I heard him drop his keys in the bowl. I heard him sigh, a long, shuddering exhale that was supposed to elicit sympathy. He walked into the room, loosened his tie, and froze when he saw my silhouette. Aurora, he breathed, his hand going to his chest. I didn't know you were awake. We need to talk. Sit down, Ethan, I said. My voice was not loud. It was not angry. It was the voice I used when I interviewed a mid-level manager suspected of embezzling petty cash. It was the voice of a professional who already knew the answer to every question she was about to ask. He hesitated, then sat on the edge of the sofa, wringing his hands. Look, about today at the office, Vanessa was out of line. She is just stressed. The whole family is under so much pressure right now. Stop, I said. I leaned forward into the slice of light coming from the street lamp outside. This is not a marital spat. This is a deposition, and you are going to answer me with the truth, or you are going to pack a bag and leave this house forever. He went still. Did you know about the credit line? I asked. Aurora, please. Did you know? I repeated, enunciating every syllable. That your family used my personal information to open an unsecured line of credit for $75,000 with Liberty Capital Solutions? Ethan looked at the floor. He looked at the wall. He looked anywhere but at me. It was supposed to be temporary, he whispered. Dad said the liquidity crunch would only last 2 weeks. We just needed to float the payroll for the construction crew. He promised he would pay it back before the first statement even arrived. So you authorized it, I stated. It wasn't a question. I didn't have a choice, he burst out, his face crumpling. You don't understand what it is like with them. When Graham asks for something, you don't say no. He said if the company went under, we all go down. He said he was doing it for us, for our future inheritance. Our future, I said, tasting the bitterness of the words. You sold my present to buy a fantasy future. I pulled out my tablet and tapped the screen, the blue light illuminating the hollows of his face. I pulled the full history. Ethan, it wasn't just this one time, was it? There was a credit inquiry 3 months after our wedding, another one 6 months later. You have been using my credit score as a piggy bank for your father's failing business since the day we said, I do. He didn't deny it. He just slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. They couldn't get loans anymore. Their debt-to-income ratio was too high. You were clean. You had perfect credit. Dad said we were technically one entity after the marriage, so it wasn't really stealing. It was just leveraging family assets. It is fraud, I corrected him. It is a felony. I waited for that to sink in. Then I asked the question that had been clawing at my throat since the party. "The bracelet," I said. "The emerald cuff. Did Diane actually lose it?" Ethan stayed silent. "Look at me," I commanded. He raised his head. His eyes were red-rimmed, terrified. "Did your mother lose the bracelet, or did Graham take it to stage a crime scene?" Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked like a child caught holding a match over a pile of dry leaves. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. It was a confession louder than any scream. "They staged it," I said, piecing the final puzzle block into place. "They knew the credit line bill was coming due. They knew they couldn't pay the $75,000, so they created a scenario where I would owe them exactly that amount, the restitution agreement. It was never about the jewelry. It was a debt swap. You were going to force me to take legal responsibility for the money you stole from me." "The gala is in 3 days," Ethan blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. "You have to understand, the Caldwell Community Endowment Gala, it is the biggest night of the year. If the investors smell fear, they will pull out. If the creditors know we are insolvent, they will seize the assets. Dad needs to show them that everything is stable. That is why they needed the paperwork signed now, to clean the books before the donors arrive." "So I was just collateral damage," I said. "I was the sacrificial lamb to keep the lights on for one more party." "We were going to fix it," Ethan pleaded. Reaching for my hand, I pulled back as if he were burning hot. Once the gala money comes in millions of dollars in donations, Dad was going to pay off everything. The bracelet would turn up, the debt would be cleared, and we would be back to normal. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in days. I saw the weakness etched into his jawline. I saw the desperate need for approval from a father who viewed him as nothing more than a pawn. He wasn't a victim of the Caldwells. He was a willing participant. He had watched me walk into that party in my old dress, knowing exactly what trap was waiting for me. And he had let it happen. The love I had for him didn't die in a dramatic explosion. It simply evaporated, leaving behind a cold, clinical clarity. "You are going to fix this," I said. "But not the way your father thinks." I picked up my phone and called Tessa. It was late, but she answered on the first ring. "He is ready," I told her. "Bring him in," Tessa said. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked, panic rising in his voice as I stood up. "We are going to see my lawyer," I said. "And you are going to sign an affidavit." "I can't testify against my family," he stammered. "You are not testifying." I lied smoothly. "You are protecting yourself. If I go down for this, Ethan, I am taking you with me for the identity theft. The only way you stay out of prison is if you go on record stating that the debt was incurred by the family business. Not by me personally. We keep it sealed. We only use it if Graham tries to enforce the debt." It was a half-truth. I needed his admission on paper to clear my name. But I also knew that once that paper existed, it was a weapon I could use whenever I chose. Ethan, in his terrifying mix of guilt and self-preservation, nodded. He was so used to being told what to do that he simply swapped one master for another. We drove to Tessa's office in silence. The city was asleep, but the lights in her warehouse were blazing. For the next hour, I sat and watched as my husband detailed the financial rot of his family legacy. Tessa typed everything, her face impassive. Ethan admitted to the unauthorized credit checks. He admitted to the transfer of funds to Caldwell Heritage Development. He admitted that the restitution agreement was drafted to cover a pre-existing financial hole. He stopped short of admitting the bracelet theft was staged. He claimed he didn't know for sure, but he admitted the timing was suspicious. It was enough. When he signed the document, his hand shook. Tessa notarized it with a crisp, authoritative stamp. "Thank you, Ethan," Tessa said, sliding the file into her safe. "You have done the right thing." He looked at me, hoping for a smile, for forgiveness. "Does this mean are we okay?" I looked at him with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen. "We are done for the night. Ethan, go home." "You aren't coming?" "No," I said. "I have work to do." He left, looking small and defeated. "You have him," Tessa said, pouring 2 glasses of water. "You have the proof. We can file the injunction tomorrow. We can stop the gala." "No," I said, taking the glass. The water was cold, grounding. "If we stop the gala, they spin it. They say I am a vindictive ex-daughter-in-law trying to ruin their charity event. They play the victim card." "So what is the play?" Tessa asked. "We let them have their party," I said. "We let Graham stand on that stage and tell everyone how successful and honorable the Caldwell family is. We let them believe they have won. We let them get confident." I thought about the look on Graham's face when he toasted to assets. I thought about Diane's fake tears. I thought about the text message from the woman who hadn't signed, the ghost of Elena Caldwell. "They want a show," I said, a dangerous calm settling over me. "I am going to give them a finale." I wasn't going to fight them in a courtroom where they could hide behind sealed records and settlements. I was going to fight them in the one place they couldn't control, the spotlight they had built for themselves. "Get the files ready," I told Tessa, "and find out how I can get access to the AV system at the venue. I have a presentation to make." The following morning, I put on a performance worthy of an Academy Award. I walked into the kitchen where Ethan was nervously drinking coffee and told him I would attend the gala. I kept my voice soft. My shoulders slumped. I wore a gray cardigan over a simple blouse, the uniform of a woman who had been beaten into submission. "I will come," I said, looking at the floor. "I want to support the family. I understand now how important appearances are." Ethan exhaled, the tension draining from his frame. He texted his mother immediately. Within minutes, the reply came. "Good. Make sure she wears something appropriate this time. No thrift store rags." They thought they had won. They thought the pressure of the lawsuit, the frozen accounts, and the threat of social ostracization had finally broken the stubborn girl from the Midwest. They were so busy celebrating their victory that they forgot to check the perimeter while they were selecting flower arrangements for the gala. Tessa was quietly mailing a thick manila envelope to the State Financial Investigation Bureau. We did not address it to a specific person to avoid tipping off any of Graham's golfing buddies. We sent it to the General Intake Division for complex fraud. The package contained a timeline of the theft, the conflicting police report timestamps, the unauthorized credit inquiries, and Ethan's notarized affidavit regarding the family's financial insolvency. It was a slow-burning fuse, timed to detonate after the fireworks of the gala had faded. But I needed something faster. I needed a weapon I could wield in real time. I drove to a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of the city and made a phone call I had not made in 5 years. "Atlas Distressed Assets," a voice answered. "This is Marcus." "Marcus," I said. "It is Aurora. Authorization code Delta 94. There was a pause, followed by a sudden shift in tone. "Aurora, we haven't heard from you since you took that corporate gig. I thought you were out of the game." The Caldwells knew I worked in risk control. What they did not know, because they never asked, and because they assumed anyone who drove a 5-year-old sedan was poor, was that before Northgate, I had been a silent partner in a private equity fund specializing in buying bad debt. I had cashed out most of my shares to buy our house, but I still held a seat on the investment committee for high-risk acquisitions. "I am looking at a tranche of commercial debt," I said, keeping my voice low. "Caldwell Heritage Development. They have a mezzanine loan with Regional Bank that is 90 days past due. The bank is looking to offload it before the quarter ends." "I see it," Marcus said, the sound of typing in the background. "It is junk status. $3 million principal. The bank is offering it at 40 cents on the dollar. They just want it off their books." "Buy it," I said. "Aurora." Marcus hesitated. "The collateral is shaky. If they default, we are looking at a protracted foreclosure on some half-finished condos." "They will not default," I said. Or rather, the default is the point. I want the debt. I want to hold the paper, and I want the acceleration clause triggered the moment the transfer is complete. You want to call the loan? Marcus asked. That is aggressive. Usually, we restructure. No restructure, I said. Buy it. Use the reserve fund. I will personally guarantee the downside if the recovery fails. Done, Marcus said. We will own their mortgage by 5 o'clock today. I hung up. I felt a cold surge of satisfaction. The Caldwells thought they were the masters of finance because they lived in a big house. They didn't understand that real power wasn't owning the building. It was owning the debt the building was built on. By tonight, I would not just be their daughter-in-law. I would be their senior creditor. I would hold the deed to their legacy. Next, I met Tessa at the event venue. The manager, Mr. Henderson, no relation to the fake notary, was less dismissive this time. Tessa had slapped a preservation of evidence letter on his desk that threatened him with obstruction of justice if any digital data from the night of the party was deleted. We just want to review the footage from the service corridor, Tessa said calmly. We have reason to believe the theft was an inside job, and we are trying to clear the venue of liability. That was the magic word. Liability. The manager paled. He didn't want his venue associated with a grand larceny investigation. I can let you view it here, he said nervously, but I cannot let you take a copy without a subpoena. We will watch it here, I said. He led us to a small security office and pulled up the time-stamped file, 9:15 in the evening, on the screen. The hallway was empty. Then, the door to the dressing room opened. Diane Caldwell stepped out. She wasn't distressed. She wasn't frantic. She stopped in front of a mirror in the hallway, adjusted her hair, checked her teeth, and then pulled out her phone. She typed a message, smiled to herself, and walked toward the stairs. She had already lost the bracelet, according to her story, yet here she was, checking her makeup, looking completely unbothered. Then, the camera caught something else. At 9:20, 5 minutes after Diane left, Graham Caldwell appeared in the frame. He walked out of the same dressing room. He looked left, then right. The hallway was clear. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, wiped his forehead, and then, in a motion so fast you would miss it if you blinked, he slid a glittering green object from his pants pocket and transferred it to the inside breast pocket of his tuxedo jacket, the emerald heritage cuff. He has it, Tessa whispered, pointing at the screen. He never lost it. He took it from Diane, waited for the signal, and then pocketed it. Rewind, I said. Look at the time. 9:20. The police report said the item was discovered missing at 9:30. I said, Graham had it on his person the entire time he was making the toast about family values. He had it when he accused me. He had it when the security guards were searching my purse. I pulled out my phone and recorded the screen. It wasn't a forensic copy, but it was enough to show intent. We have them, Tessa said, leaning back. Grand larceny, filing a false police report, insurance fraud, conspiracy, and we have the debt, I added. By now, Atlas has closed the deal. We own the paper on their company. I looked at the image of Graham on the screen, smoothing his jacket over the stolen bracelet. He looked so confident, so untouchable. He had no idea that the broke girl he tried to frame was about to walk into his gala holding the detonator to his entire life. Do not send this to the police yet, I told Tessa. If we arrest them now, it happens quietly. They will post bail. They will spin the story. They will say it was a misunderstanding. So what are you going to do? Tessa asked. I am going to the gala, I said. They want a show? They want to parade their success in front of the whole town? Fine, I will help them with the presentation. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. I didn't buy a new dress. I went to my closet and pulled out the same simple black dress I had worn to my mother's funeral. It was severe, elegant, and vanished into the background. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I wore no jewelry. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like a threat. I looked like a penitent woman coming to beg for forgiveness. Perfect. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. We are heading to the venue. Dad is in a great mood. He says he is proud of you for doing the right thing. Just keep your head down tonight and smile. I stared at the message. Proud of me. I picked up my clutch. Inside, I didn't have lipstick or a compact. I had a USB drive containing the security footage, the affidavit from Ethan, the loan documents from Atlas Distressed Assets, and the suicide note from Elena Caldwell that I had found in the public archives. I walked out to my car. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and blood red. It was a beautiful night for a takedown. I will smile. Ethan, I said to the empty car, I will smile right up until the moment I burn it all down. The countdown began exactly 24 hours before the doors were set to open for the Caldwell Community Endowment Gala. The house was vibrating with a manic energy, the kind of frantic polishing and arranging that happens when people are trying to hide rot under a layer of expensive wax. I was sitting in the sunroom, staring at the manicured lawn, when my phone pinged. It was an email from Vanessa. The subject line read, "Speech draft. Memorize this." I opened the attachment. It was a script written for me to deliver to 300 of the state's most influential donors. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aurora Brooks, and I stand here tonight as a testament to the incredible generosity of the Caldwell family. When I married Ethan, I came from nothing. I was struggling, lost, and frankly, destitute. But Graham and Diane did not just open their doors. They opened their hearts. They saved me from financial ruin, and in doing so, taught me the true meaning of charity. I read it twice. The bile rose in my throat. It wasn't just a speech. It was a public branding. They wanted me to stand on a stage and declare myself a charity case. They wanted to humiliate me so thoroughly that no one would ever believe I was capable of managing my own life, let alone exposing their crimes. It was a narrative designed to strip me of credibility forever. It is a bit heavy-handed, isn't it? I looked up. Ethan was standing there, holding 2 cups of tea. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. The circles under his eyes were dark bruises. "It is what Dad wants," he said, setting the tea down. He didn't look at me. "He says it is the only way to explain everything, the missing funds, the rumors. If you say you were the one who needed help, it justifies the withdrawals from the endowment accounts. So I am the cover story," I said flatly. "I am the human shield for your father's embezzlement. It is a truce, Aurora," Ethan said, his voice pleading. "If you do this, if you just say the words and play the part of the grateful daughter-in-law, they are willing to drop the bracelet issue entirely. No police, no insurance claim. It goes away." "And the $75,000? I asked. "You will just sign a private acknowledgement after the gala," he said quickly. "Just for the family records. We won't enforce it. I promise. It is just to balance the books for the audit." I looked at him, my husband, the man who had vowed to honor and protect me. He was asking me to destroy my own name to save his inheritance. He truly believed that if I just submitted one last time, the monster would be sated. He didn't understand that monsters are never sated. They only get hungrier. "Okay," I said softly. "I will do it. Ethan, I will say the words." Visibly relieved, he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. "Thank you. You are doing the right thing. We can put this whole nightmare behind us after tomorrow." "Yes," I agreed. "We certainly can." I waited until he left the room before I checked my secure email. There was a new notification from Atlas Distressed Assets. Transaction complete. Title transferred. Acceleration notice prepared for execution. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp expression that felt foreign on my face. The Caldwell Heritage Development debt, all $3 million of it, was now legally mine. Or rather, it belonged to a holding company I controlled. The moment the gala ended, I had the legal right to demand full repayment immediately. If they couldn't pay, and I knew they couldn't, I could foreclose on everything: their office, their unfinished condos, their legacy. They were forcing me to play the role of the beggar, unaware that I had just bought the castle. An hour later, Tessa called. "We are set," she said, her voice crisp. "The State Financial Investigation Bureau has placed 2 agents on the guest list. They are coming in as potential donors from a partner charity. They will be wearing wires." "Do they know about the bracelet?" I asked. "They know everything," Tessa confirmed. "They have the affidavit. They have the timeline. But they want to catch Graham in the act of solicitation. If he asks for donations for the endowment while knowing the money is going to service his private debt, it is wire fraud. It is a federal offense. They just need him to say it into the microphone." "He will," I said. "He is too arrogant not to. Be careful." "Aurora," Tessa warned. "When they realize what is happening, it is going to get ugly. Make sure you are not in the blast radius." "I am the detonator, Tessa," I said. "I have to be there." That evening, during the final dress rehearsal at the venue, I decided to test the waters. The ballroom was being prepped. Immense floral arrangements of white lilies and hydrangeas covering the stage. Diane was directing the caterers, her voice shrill and demanding. I walked up to her. "Diane, the flowers are beautiful." She jumped, spinning around. "Aurora, you startled me. Did you memorize the speech?" "I did," I lied. "I was just wondering about security. With all these high-profile guests, are we sure the venue is safe? I heard the new camera systems here are incredible. They have 4K resolution. You can see the time on a wristwatch from across the room." Diane's face went rigid. Her eyes darted to the ceiling, scanning for the black domes of the cameras. "I am sure it is fine. We have our own security. Graham insisted on it." "Of course," I said, keeping my tone light. "It is just good to know that everything is being recorded. The truth is so important, isn't it?" She didn't answer. She turned on her heel and marched away, her hands trembling as she reached for her phone. She was terrified. She knew she had lied about the dressing room. She knew Graham had the bracelet, and now she was wondering if the electronic eyes in the ceiling had seen it too. But the real shock came 20 minutes later. I was backstage, looking for a bottle of water, when I saw Graham's suit jacket draped over a chair. He was on stage, shouting at the lighting technician. I saw a folded piece of paper sticking out of his pocket. It wasn't the speech Vanessa had sent me. It was his own speech. I glanced around. No one was watching. I pulled it out and scanned the bullet points. Welcome guests. Legacy of the Caldwells. Our commitment to charity. The unfortunate situation with our daughter-in-law. Admit her struggles with addiction and theft. Announce we are covering her debts as a final act of kindness. Ask for donations to the Family Recovery Fund to help others like her. I froze. He wasn't just going to let me apologize. He was going to frame me for addiction. He was going to publicly diagnose me with a problem I didn't have to explain why the family finances were a mess. "Oh, we lost money because we were paying for Aurora's rehab. We are saints." He was going to murder my reputation to solicit pity donations. I shoved the paper back into his pocket. My heart wasn't racing. It had slowed to a heavy, rhythmic thud. Any lingering doubt I had, any tiny fragment of mercy for Ethan or his parents, evaporated in that cool backstage air. They weren't just desperate. They were malicious. They were willing to burn a human being alive on stage to keep their country club membership. I walked out of the venue and into the night air. The city lights of Charlotte twinkled in the distance, indifferent to the war that was about to start. I drove home and showered. I put on the black dress. I pulled my hair back. I applied my makeup with the precision of war paint. Ethan was waiting by the door in his tuxedo. "You look nice," he said, though he looked like he was about to vomit. "Are you ready?" "I am ready," I said. We drove to the gala in silence. When we pulled up to the valet, the cameras flashed. The local press was there. Graham had invited everyone. He wanted a spectacle. I stepped out of the car. The air was cool. I looked up at the grand facade of the building. Inside, Graham was waiting to destroy me. Inside, Diane was waiting to play the victim. Inside, Vanessa was waiting to gloat. They thought I was walking into my execution. I clutched my purse tighter. I felt the outline of the USB drive. I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the scapegoat. I was the auditor. And the audit was about to begin. I took Ethan's arm. He felt flimsy, like paper. "Let's go," I said. We walked up the red carpet. I smiled at the photographers. It wasn't a smile of gratitude. It was the smile of a hunter who has just heard the trap snap shut. The ballroom of the Grand Bohemian Hotel was a kaleidoscope of diamonds, velvet, and the heavy, cloying scent of expensive lilies. 300 of Charlotte's elite had gathered under the crystal chandeliers, sipping champagne and whispering about the rumors surrounding the Caldwell family. To them, this was just another gala. To Graham Caldwell, it was a coronation. To me, it was an autopsy. I sat at table 4, next to a trembling Ethan. He kept drinking water, his knuckles white as he gripped the glass. On stage, the backdrop was a massive projection of the Caldwell family crest, looming over the podium like a shield. "Ladies and gentlemen," Graham's voice boomed over the speakers, smooth as aged scotch. "Tonight is about legacy. It is about the bonds that hold a community together. But even the strongest families face trials." The room went quiet. This was the script. This was the moment he would paint me as the villain to solicit sympathy and donations. Graham looked down at me, his eyes filled with a faux sadness that made my stomach turn. "We pride ourselves on strength, but we also believe in mercy. Recently, our family has had to navigate a difficult situation involving a breach of trust, a theft within our own home, committed by someone we welcomed with open arms. Diane, standing to his left, dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Vanessa stood beside her, looking solemn, the picture of a supportive sister. It has been a financial strain," Graham continued, lowering his voice to a confidential murmur, "covering the losses, managing the legal fallout. But we decided not to prosecute. We decided to heal, because that is what Caldwells do." He paused for effect. A ripple of sympathetic applause moved through the crowd. "Aurora," Graham said, extending a hand toward my table, "would you please join us on stage? We want to publicly welcome you back into the fold as you take responsibility for your actions." The trap was sprung. He wanted me to stand there, mute and shamed, while he pinned his financial crimes on my chest like a scarlet letter. I stood up. Ethan reached for my wrist. "Just do it," he hissed. "Please." I pulled my arm away and walked toward the stairs. I did not look down. I did not look humble. I walked with the steady, rhythmic click of my heels echoing on the hardwood. I ascended the steps and took the place Graham indicated, right next to the podium. "Thank you, Graham," I said, leaning into the microphone. My voice did not shake. "It is true. I did come to the Harvest Lantern party wearing a cheap dress. I did drive an old car, and because of that, you assumed I was desperate." Graham frowned, sensing the deviation from the script. "Aurora, dear, just the apology. I believe in transparency," I continued, my voice hardening. "And since we are asking this community for money tonight, I think they deserve to see exactly what kind of theft occurred." I pulled a small remote from my clutch and pressed the play button. I had not just secured the footage. I had paid the audio-visual technician $500 to patch my laptop directly into the main projector. The massive family crest on the screen flickered and vanished. In its place, a grainy but high-definition video feed appeared. The timestamp in the corner read 9:20 p.m. The entire room gasped. On the screen, the door to the guest dressing room opened. Graham Caldwell stepped out. He looked left. He looked right. He was alone in the hallway. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, and wiped his forehead. Then, with a quick, practiced motion, he pulled a glittering green object from his trousers and slid it into the interior pocket of his tuxedo jacket. It was the Emerald Heritage cuff. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Graham spun around, staring at the screen in horror. "Turn it off," he screamed. "Cut the feed." But the video looped. Graham taking the bracelet, Graham hiding the bracelet, over and over again. "You didn't lose it," I said, my voice cutting through the panic. "You stole it from yourself. You staged a crime scene because you needed an insurance payout. And more importantly, you needed a scapegoat." "She is lying!" Diane shrieked, dropping her handkerchief. "It is a deep fake. She is tech-savvy. She doctored it." "It is raw footage from the venue's server," a sharp voice called out from the side of the stage. Tessa Langford walked out from behind the curtain, holding a thick file. She didn't look like a guest. She looked like an executioner in a pantsuit. "I am Aurora's attorney," Tessa announced to the stunned crowd, "and I am holding a restitution agreement that this family attempted to force my client to sign. This document attempts to transfer $3 million of corporate debt from the Caldwell Community Endowment to Aurora Brooks, disguised as a repayment for the jewelry mister. Caldwell just stole in that video." "Security!" Graham yelled, his face turning a shade of purple I had never seen before. "Get them off the stage." "I wouldn't do that," Tessa said calmly. "Because we also have this." She held up a single sheet of paper. "This is a sworn affidavit from Ethan Brooks, admitting that the family knowingly opened unauthorized lines of credit in his wife's name to service the interest on their failing development projects." The room turned to look at Ethan. He was still sitting at table 4, but he had slumped so low in his chair, he looked like he was trying to merge with the tablecloth. "Ethan," Graham whispered into the microphone, the betrayal echoing through the speakers. You signed?" "He did," I answered for him. "He signed it to stay out of prison for identity theft. He sold you out to save himself, Graham, just like you tried to sell me out to save your reputation." Vanessa lunged at me. "You bitch! You ruined us!" "No," I said, stepping back. "I just audited you." I turned back to the crowd. "I played the role of the poor relation for one night, and the moment you thought I was vulnerable, you didn't offer me help. You offered me a cage. You didn't despise me because I was broke. You targeted me because you thought I was weak enough to carry your sins." Graham was hyperventilating now, clutching the podium. "It doesn't matter," he stammered, trying to regain control. "This is a family dispute. We will handle it. We still own the assets. We still control the development." "Actually," I said, delivering the final blow. "You don't." I pulled out my phone and held it up. As of 5 o'clock this evening, the mezzanine debt for Caldwell Heritage Development, totaling $3.2 million, was purchased by a private equity firm called Atlas Distressed Assets. Graham froze. He knew the name. Everyone in finance knew the name. "I am the managing partner of the acquisition committee for Atlas," I said, watching the realization dawn on his face. "I bought your debt, Graham. I own your mortgage. I own your construction loans. And since you are in default on the covenants, I am exercising the acceleration clause effective immediately." I smiled. "You are not the host of this party anymore. You are trespassing on my property." Graham's knees gave out. He actually collapsed, sliding down the side of the podium. Diane was sobbing, not for effect this time, but from the terrifying reality that the money was gone. At the back of the room, the doors swung open. 6 men in windbreakers stepped in. They didn't need invitations. On the back of their jackets, in bright yellow letters, were the words, "State Financial Investigation Bureau." They moved with efficiency, heading straight for the stage. One agent secured the exits. Another approached Graham, who was still on the floor. "Graham Caldwell," the lead agent said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "We have a warrant for your arrest for wire fraud, insurance fraud, and embezzlement." The flashbulbs from the press went off like strobe lights, capturing every second of their downfall. The family that had wanted to be the center of attention finally got their wish. I walked past them. I walked past a sobbing Diane. I walked past a screaming Vanessa. I walked past Ethan, who couldn't even look at me. I stood at the edge of the stage and looked out at the silent, shocked crowd of socialites. "I came here poor to see who was rich in heart," I said into the microphone one last time. "It turns out, you were only rich in habit." I dropped the microphone. The feedback squealed, a high-pitched cry that signaled the end of the show. I walked down the stairs, through the parted sea of donors, and out into the cool, clean night air. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on the ending. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and support us by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.